Okay, nice to see you again. You got the plan that we sent you? You had a chance to read it?
I have, yeah.
Did it make some
It did.
good sense?
It makes sense.
And you've got plenty of questions to go through, I understand. You've been very good and you've sent us those questions in advance. So what I'll do is I'll just go through those questions and then, then hopefully you'll get a clear understanding. So the first thing you asked me to explain a little bit more about was the cash flow forecast. So it's probably worth just spending a little bit of time on that. What you've got here is two different types of charts in the plan. You've got cash flow charts and you've got asset charts. What the cash flow charts are showing you is the black line is your income, and is your expenditure, and the blue blocks are your income. And where there's red blocks, that means your income is less than your expenditure. So what you can clearly see here is if you were to carry on as you are at the moment, you're spending more than your necessary expenditure during your working life, but you're going to run out of money very quickly once you start retiring. And what you see in the asset chart is then what's happening in the background for that same situation. So here you've got money in pensions and savings, but as soon as you retire, because there's over expenditure, you spend it very quickly and you run out very quickly. So what we've also seen then in this chart here is that we've got you've taken the recommendations that we've given you, i.e. we're going to save some money into pensions, put some money into ISAs, those sorts of things, then what we can do is we can get you to the point where you do have sufficient income for the rest of your life up to age 100, and you can see that because there's no red there. But also you can see that by looking at what's happening in the background of what's happening to your pension, which is in brown, and your investments, which are in orange, which is showing that actually they're clearly rising and rising. Even when you're drawing an income in retirement, your assets are still rising. So that's what's going on with the cash flow forecast. Does that answer your questions for that?
Yeah.
One other thing that is worth talking about is that what we've tried to do is, given that we've talked about the different ways in which we can draw your income out, and we've talked about what's important to you, like going on safari, and once you retire doing lots of different trips, what we've done is we've tried to model your cash flow forecast to actually reflect all of those different needs. So you'll see in the early years we've given you a much higher income so that you can get some of the bucket list out of the way. After you get to age 70, what we do is we give you a spike every other year, so you can maybe do a safari every other year from 70 to 75. And then at that point, once you've gone past that sort of age, sort of 78, we're accepting that really actually you're going to spend less money the older and older you get, accepting that by age 96 you're probably going to be spending significantly less. So that's what we've done now, and hopefully that makes sense now that you've seen that. The next thing you wanted to know was how will you see your investments over time? Well, if you become one of our family clients, what we'll send you is a quarterly investment report. If you become an annual client, a planning client, then we'll send you this annually. But what you will see from us doing that is three really important types of charting. The first and the most important is what we call above or below the line. So on here, we'll give you a chart that shows you that line is how much you've invested at each point. And you can see it will jump up as and when you put new monies in, and it will start to drop down as and when you take monies out. And in the background, you'll see the value of the investments that we manage for you. So you can constantly see whether you're above or below the line, and you can see clearly where your investments are. And what you'll also give you is investment reporting to show you what's happening with investments at any one time. So this is specifically the underlying investments, whereas this is how it actually affects you. And also, again, this is breaking down that investment into the different accounts that we've got for you. You asked me to explain a little bit about pensions, so it's worth just touching on that and how the tax treatment works. So in the lead up to retirement, you're putting your money in. You get some tax back from the government as a result of putting money in, and also you've got money from your company that goes in there. You can also put, later on once you've built up your pension, you can start to put more specific things in there in addition to investments like property and intellectual property. But that pension grows tax-free until such time as you want to start taking that money out. You can also make in-specie contributions of putting shares and property direct into the pension, but that's probably a bit beyond you at this stage. But as and when you then get to retirement, you've saved up this big lump of money. 25% of it is available as a tax-free lump sum from the age of 55 at the moment, but it will be rising to 57. And then the remainder needs to buy you an income. Now, traditionally what happened was that meant you bought an annuity, so that's a fixed guaranteed income for the rest of your life. You can't increase it, decrease it, stop it or start it, you know it's fixed. Alternatively, you can go into what's called drawdown. Drawdown basically allows you to leave that money invested within your pension. You can still take 25% tax-free lump sum, but the rest of it can remain in your pension. You can drip it out as quickly or as slowly as you want. So it's what allows us to facilitate giving you a higher income in the early years in retirement and a lower income later on. It means that we can manage your tax much better because we've obviously got control as to how much income we take. And it means that if there's money left in your pension at the end, then you can leave it to your family and children. There used to be a 55% tax charge, but that's also being scrapped. So you then wanted to know what a wrap platform is, which is a commonly asked question. So let's go through that. Well, traditionally, people used to have a couple of ISAs, they used to have several pensions, they might hold some shares, and they might have the odd investment bond if they'd been a senior financial advisor. And of course that meant that you'd got administration, reporting and paperwork and investments and valuations from all of these different companies. It meant it was really difficult to keep track of it all, but it also meant it's really difficult to manage it as one investment portfolio. You've actually got lots and lots of different layers of investments. So nowadays what we do is we invest on what's called a wrap platform. What that does is it means that you can still use those different tax wrappers to minimise tax, but it's all managed in one centralised place. So think about it almost as a technology bubble that sits over the top of your investment. What that does is it means that you can invest in pretty much any investment that's out there, so you're not restricted by the investment restrictions you normally see for like Aviva pension. You normally only get the Aviva investment funds, for example. This gives you pretty much the whole open market to invest in. And what that means is that we can design the perfect portfolio for you, and then we can apply it to the whole wrap platform. So that's your ISAs, your pensions, your investment bonds, etc. Yeah. Doesn't mean that they have to be all the same, but it can be. And for most people, it actually makes sense that they probably are. Once you're invested in that wrap platform, money can move between those, subject to the legislative boundaries that obviously pensions put in place. But money can move between those the different tax wrappers. So for example, you might take money out of investment bonds to feed your ISAs to make sure you use up your tax allowances in the same way that you might do for shares or other unit trusts. Also, that money can all be managed as one investment so that we can move money from, if we want to get rid of one fund that's not performing very well and replace it with another fund, we're not restricted by the number of funds that are available with that particular account. We can just do the whole thing. Finally, we can monitor the performance much better, and we can manage income when you come to draw it much better. And because you've got the clarity of it all being in one place, as well as having the ability to log in online and see it. So typically, it will look something like this. You'll get a valuation here, and you can see that the underlying investments all in one place, and you can look at all the transaction history in one place. So your next question was about the portfolio itself. So it's worth just looking at that. So we've designed, as you'll see in the plan, we've got the efficient fund here. So what's happened is your answers to the Behavioral Finance questionnaire have given you the red block. So anywhere in that red block is appropriate for you, to you as an investor. And we've just aimed to be in the middle of that. And obviously if we remove it higher or lower, that's going to give you an expected return plus inflation of these figures here, as you can see. But by having a diversified portfolio, you can generate much smoother returns for the level of risk that you're comfortable with than if you just go off and put it all in the FTSE 100, for example. What you'll also see from investing in this approach is we've got what's called organised what's called trigger rebalancing. Trigger rebalancing just means that over time, if we kept it simple and said 50% was going to be cash, 50% was going to be share, over time those percentages would change, wouldn't they? Because the shares more than likely would outperform the cash. So what would happen is over time your portfolio would gradually become riskier and riskier as the amount of shares went up. So what's important is that we rebalance that. Now most people in the industry do it just on an annual basis or on a quarterly basis. But a much more effective way of doing it is as and when each different sector that we're investing in hits a particular trigger. And by only rebalancing at the point at which they hit those triggers, it might mean you do it 3 times, they might do it 3 times in a quarter and then not for another 2 quarters. What it does is it's shown to add up between 0.25% extra growth as a result of trigger rebalancing. So that's a really good thing that we will do. So you then wanted to understand a bit more about our charges, which is a commonly asked question. Well, our charge, or the charges, not just our charges. The charges are broken up into 2 different types of charges. There's the initial charges, which are basically paying for the whole thing, the whole plan to be set up. And then there's the ongoing charges. So let's look at the initial charges first. So the initial charge, there's 4 different people that can be involved in this transaction. You've got the platform, the wrap platform that we put the money on. You've got the discretionary manager who manages the underlying investments. You've got the underlying fund costs of what you of the funds that you get put into, and then you've got us to give you the advice and to do the legwork in terms of setting it all up. Well, on the initial fees, you will pay nothing to the platform, nothing to the discretionary manager, and nothing to the underlying funds, because all of the initial charges have been waived as a result of the way that we've structured this for you. So the only initial fee you need to pay is for us to do all the legwork in actually getting the thing set up in the first place. And our fees, as you've seen in the plan, start at 3% on the first 100,000, 2% on the next 200, 1.7% up to $1 million, and 0.7% thereafter. For you, we can graduate that down and say it's actually, given the amount of money we're going to be investing for you, it's going to be 1.7%. Just as a couple of examples, if you were going direct to a fund like Jupiter European, you would pay an initial charge of 5%. And also if you were going to go direct or go off and use a different restricted advisor like St James's Place, and I just picked that as an example because they're the people that most people know in our industry, then you'd pay an initial charge of between 4.5 and 5%, depending on the product they put you into. Of course, the cynic in me might suggest that they might lead you towards the things that pay 5%. So then there's the ongoing fees. So this is to pay for the ongoing investment management, ongoing advice, etc., etc. So the platform that we use, the Well-Time platform, charges 0.3%. This Portfolio Metrics, which are the discretionary manager, charge 0.42%. That's actually 0.35 plus VAT. The underlying fund costs of a typical portfolio, we pick a midpoint risk portfolio, but that's very similar to where you are, is likely to be around 0.59%, but of course that varies as the fund manager changes it. And then finally, you've got our charge. Now, depending on the level of service you want from us, that will vary between 0.5% and 0.95%. So the total expense ratio, which is the important figure to look at here, is not annual management charges, which often exclude certain costs. Total expense ratio for each of those 3 solutions, ours will be between 1.81 and 2.26. You go direct to the Jupiter European Fund again as an example. We pick that example because it's a fund that's in the portfolio at the moment. Total expense ratio is about 1.78%, and going to a restricted advisor like SJP is between 2.1 and 2.3%. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to give you a fully independent advised solution where the initial cost of getting in is significantly less than most of the alternatives in the industry. And at the same time, the ongoing cost, depending on whether you want our full service, which includes things like cash flow forecasting, which you won't even get through St James's Place, or whether you want our more basic ongoing service, it puts it in a really competitive position. So I think that's most of the questions you listed. Let's just, you said what was the problem with investing in cash? A very easy way to look at that is if we look at inflation over from 2009 to 2013 compared to your savings will underperform the inflation, so actually that's what's happening in real terms to your money. And you also ask about diversified portfolio and the difference between investing in that versus inflation. And so that's a chart that just shows you, and that's not even our portfolio, that's just the average of all diversified funds during that time frame. As I say, I think that's most of the questions that you've asked. See if there are any others worth explaining. Oh, one thing you said about was the benefit of having a fully diversified portfolio rather than just investing in cash and bonds. Cash and equities. Because you can actually achieve exactly the same level of risk by investing in cash and equities as you could a fully diversified portfolio. But the best way to look at that is an underwater analysis. So this is when the market's down, how badly did you suffer? And by having a fully multi-asset diversified portfolio, which is the blue line, you can see that you were significantly less affected by those horrible periods than you were if you only have the two asset classes. And you can also see exactly the same thing in terms of performance. One other thing you said about was trying to time the market. Should we be trying to time the market? Well, actually, there's a saying that time in the market is better than time in the market. And this slide just shows you the effect of missing the best days over the last 42 years. And even if we ignore the chance of missing the best 100 days and the best 20 days, if you if you just missed the best 10 days over a 42-year period, you would have missed out on 50.8% of the returns. If you were really unlucky and you missed the best 100 days over that 42 period, you lost 97.7% of the return. So it's better to be in the market than trying to time it. Probably the last thing that's worth talking about is trusts, because we've highlighted that as well. So what typically happens if somebody doesn't have a will and trust is that they leave everything to their spouse. What that means is if their spouse was to get remarried after their death and then get divorced, a lot of their money could disappear off in a divorce settlement. If they were to get remarried and then die, actually the whole thing could end up going to their future spouse if they haven't written another will. And even if none of that happens, all of that money sat in the spouse's estate and liable to inheritance tax on their death. So the benefit of putting a trust in place is on first death, some money can go to the trust. The spouse can still get access to it and spend it during their lifetime. What it does provide then is protection against divorce, and also it starts to get money outside of the estate for inheritance tax purposes. Once the spouse is gone, they leave it to the trust, because when they pass that money down to the children, what that will also do is ensure if the children were to get divorced, then you wouldn't start losing your money to the son-in-law from help. And equally, if God forbid something was to happen to your children, the money could pass back to your trust and to their siblings or to their children without inheritance tax. So it's just really sensible planning to have trusts built into your will. I think that answers all of your questions. You said about flexible reversion trust for your parents. That's probably worth just explaining. So what is happening here is you're investing a lump sum into a trust. Now you're effectively giving up the right to accessing that lump sum. But each year you have the opportunity to have 10% of the capital back. Now the idea of this money, putting this in, is that this is money that hopefully you won't ever need. So each year you have the opportunity to turn that down. And what will happen if you turn it down is it will roll over. So in year 2, if you rolled that first lot over to year 2, in year 2 you have the opportunity to take 20% back if you want to, and so on and so on. So it's a great way of getting money out of the estate, because it takes 7 years to get out of the estate in a gift, whilst retaining the option to get some of the money back if you were to ever need it in the future. You can also make appointments or loans to the beneficiaries during your lifetime if you so wish. I think that's most of the questions that you had listed. Do you have any other questions that you would like me to answer?
No, that's fine.
Okay, fantastic. In that case, are you happy to proceed with all our recommendations? Okay, fantastic. In that case, what we'll do is we'll get an implementation meeting organised with all the paperwork to go through. Let me explain the process from here on in. So following today's meeting, we'll send you what's called a planning meeting follow-up. That will be an email that's got lots and lots and lots of attachments to it. It's got all the things like the illustrations and the key features document. Rather than printing out a lever arch file full of paper and just handing it to you, we prefer to send it to you electronically so that you get what's important. You'll get that in the next couple of days. What we'll then do is we'll send a suitability letter. A suitability, we might actually even attach it to that same email, but the suitability letter will just, we've obviously made our recommendations in the plan, but the suitability letter will just summarise exactly what we've said, that, what we've agreed to implement. Once you've got that, we'll then start to process the application forms and we'll apply for the different things. Obviously the money that's flowing from the existing pension will move across that'll take a little bit of time, but we'll keep you updated throughout that process. And then finally, what we'll do is we'll go through walk you through the underwriting process, get all of that in place, get the trust in place once the protection policy is all set up, and then you'll book your annual review for about a year from now, and we'll continue to do that. So the last thing we need to do is just go through the ongoing level of service that you would like from us.
Okay.
Given what we're doing for you, the most obvious 2 choices would be either the planning client or the family client. The key difference between the 2 is the planning client will do an annual face-to-face review with you, as well as a whole load of other things. But with the family client, as well as that annual face-to-face review, we'll send you the quarterly investment review that I showed you earlier on. And also what we'll do is we'll keep your lifetime cash flow forecast up to date and renew it each year for the review, so that what that means is we can spend our review time going through the cash flow forecast. It tends to mean that also the review meetings are a bit longer because there's a lot more to talk about. My recommendation would be to go onto a family client program, because I think the cash flow forecast, given your stage in life, would be really valuable, but it's entirely up to you. Have you got any indications to which you think you prefer?
I want the cash flow forecasting service.
Okay, perfect. So we'll sign you up to the family client program. So we'll start sending you the